This is the Data Science Seminar number 12 with Roger Moore. And please, I'll hand it over to Roger to introduce the topic and get started. We do ask that if you have questions, you're actually welcome to put them in the chat or use the raise hand feature. Roger welcomes that, and he's happy to answer questions throughout. And then we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A. So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Roger, for being with us today.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. So yeah, first of all, I'll emphasize that I prefer this to be more of a discussion than me just talking. I'd like to understand what's of interest to you. So if there's a question or comment, please feel free to step in. Okay. And then just a quick background for me. I've been in management consulting for most of my career. A good chunk of that time spent at the Boston Consulting Group. And then most recently, I spent 3 years as part of the leadership team for Gartner's data and analytics consulting practice. I started teaching in the program about 12 years ago, 11 or 12, and I became an associate clinical professor about a year and a half ago. And I live and breathe, kind of AI data science, and I have for my career. They didn't call it that back in the early days. It was more literally, yeah, data and analytics, not AI and data science, but uh, newer, faster, all that kind of stuff happening now, which is kind of great. And beside teaching, at the university, I also support the university in a couple of other programs. So I am, as Mario was mentioning, I teach in Chicago Booth's come on, what is it? Chicago Booth's Chief AI Officer Certificate Program. I teach one of the 7 courses in that, and that course is from business to AI strategy. Okay. And what I want to bring to you today is, how do we get to what do we do for AI? How do we identify what we're going to do next? How do we find that next big opportunity? And it doesn't just drop in our laps. We have to think about putting this together. And there's 3 things that we'll kind of cover. One is, kind of where do I find these opportunities? How do I, kind of identify them? How do I think about uh, some sort of framework to score them? How do I figure out which one's the best one that I should work on? And then finally, now I've got, the opportunities, I've scored them. How do I prioritize them? Because just because I've got scored, doesn't mean I'm going to take the highest score and do that. I still may want to play with it a little bit. There's still some art involved. Okay. So let me share my screen, and screen 3, share. And I need to do just a quick move around of things to make it work for me. And let's see, that wasn't working quite right. There we go. Okay, now I've got everything set. And hopefully you can see the screen. Okay, yeah, there we go. So let's start out right away. So how do I identify these AI opportunities? And again, like I said, they don't fall in your lap. And in fact, for any organization, there isn't likely just one thing to work on. There's likely a very large number of these opportunities. And there is no way for an organization to do everything all at once. They're typically limited resources in terms of people, in terms of dollars, even in terms of agents to actually go after these things. There's only so much you can do at any given time. So you need to kind of build these things up and then start figuring out how to deal with them. So let's look at identifying these things. And one of the first ways to do is to leverage the business, to leverage some business frameworks that are out there that allow you to think about what's going on in the business and how can I use that to find places where there are opportunities to do things, or even more specifically, where are the pain points in the organization? And so there are tools like driver trees, value chains, and other frameworks like Porter's 5 Forces, SWOT analysis that all allow the business kind of describe what's going on and where things are. And I talked about that pain point thing too. One easy way to do this without the frameworks is, I can go in and if I'm working with Patrick on this, and Patrick is the business leader, I can just ask Patrick. It's like, hey, Patrick, what's keeping you up at night? What's a big problem that you have? Because if I just ask Patrick, yeah, what AI can I do for you? Patrick's going to go like, I don't know. But Patrick does know what keeps him up at night. Okay. But these frameworks allow you to take a more, shall I say, structured look at what's going on. And so driver trees basically allow you to take any kind of look at the business. And a lot of times it starts out at a specific area. I might start out at rather than at the top with profit. Profit is revenue and cost. And the revenue side, I have to think about the products, the markets, the customers. I might start out, I need to work on my product. I've got issues with my product and I need to think about what I can do around that. And so I would start out with products. I'd say I can do new products. I can do new features on products. I can optimize pricing for the products I have, things like that. Okay. And what you do then as you start identifying, it's like, okay, um, I've got products and my revenue just isn't where it needs to be. So I can think about how can I optimize pricing? And that sounds like to me that there's some AI involved with that. So I can look at, what's been going on with our pricing in the past. In the future, we can look at, can we forecast pricing and come up with a better pricing model and suggest, okay, if we take the price up, how much demand do we think is going to go down and do that? But I can build a model around that. And I can look at other things too, markets. A good example. I've done a lot of work around what's the next country we should go into. I worked with a large PNC, property and casualty insurance company, and they wanted to know what's the next best country to go into. And that ended up being a fairly sophisticated model to identify the best country. And it was a mix of different characteristics about the countries. You needed to have enough things that could go wrong in the country. So if there was, you need like earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes or something like that, where people were concerned about having insurance, or crime is another area that you need insurance on. And then also you had to have the side where do people in the country have disposable income? Do they have money available to, or companies have available money to spend on those things? So you can build and figure out, where do I go next in that market? And just as an example for that, it's sort of like um, an island like Haiti, which basically has almost every natural disaster known to man happening on that little island. Um, there's lots of stuff where insurance would be helpful, but the vast majority of the population doesn't have a lot of disposable income. So it ends up that that's not a highly likely, country to go to. But that's where you can help. So that's what these driver trees can help you identify. Okay. Um, and let's see if I can get my thing to flip. There we go. Another one is something called the value chain. And the value chain is all about, how do I take my raw materials that I get coming into my organization, and how do I push them out to the customer? In this case, we're looking at basically thinking about an organization that develops products and sells them to retailers. So this is sort of a B2B kind of environment. But I have these steps in my model. I have, procurement, where I pull in all of the stuff I need. I have design and development of the products I'm going to make. I have the manufacturing and logistics of getting those products completed and pushed out to the retailers that I have. I have sales. So how do I price these things? How do I forecast these things? How do I optimize my channels? And then finally, there's marketing. How do I sell this to those retailers? How do I make them see that these are good things to do? And what I can do is, since I've, for each of these parts of the value chain, I've identified the components of them and gone down into specific areas. And again, I can look at, what of these things can I use AI to help on, kind of coming up with the better answer for. Um, so, um, we can pick. let's see, manufacturing, production efficiency. I can come up with modeling to see, where am I wasting materials? Is there a more efficient way of manufacturing that reduces waste in some way, shape, or form? Either by improving conditions, by improving the layout, if it's cutting out of materials, or things like that. So that's an area. On pricing, again, we talked about pricing before in the driver tree, but um, I might want to look in and understand, what can I do with pricing to make things better? Forecasting, channel optimization, what are the best channels? How do I make sure I'm using them the best way I can? Um, I did a lot of work with promotions effectiveness, worked on projects with many customers around trade promotion excellence. And that's all about, how do I set position in a store? So do I, is it not do I put it in an end aisle, or do I put it in, they call them coffins. So like kind of things set off aside where you could put products into. Do I think about pricing changes to it? Do I think about just featuring it? And an interesting thing to think about is, we found in this stuff that a product placement and a feature actually pointing and saying this is a special item, generated sales even if you didn't reduce the price. So if you just put it, especially on the end aisle, and said, here's a cool product, people bought it without realizing they were still paying the full price. They just assumed that it was on the end aisle, therefore it must be cheaper. So placement ended up being kind of a key thing that went on down there. And again, if you modeled that, if you looked at that, you'd start seeing that those kinds of things come into play here. So value chains, and then just to call it out, value chains work in different places. This is the value chain of one of those retailers, and looking at it from, I get it, so I'm getting it into my my kind of organization. I need to get it around to the different stores. I need to merchandise it. I need to get it on the shelves. How many items should I have on a shelf for a specific product? How many facings should I have? If it's a very popular product, I want to have enough facings and enough product on the shelf to last between the delivery times. You want the days of supply to, match up with how long it takes to get that product. Um, if I have too much, I'm sitting with extra inventory. If I don't have enough, I'm going to run out. I'm going to be out of stock on items. If I have 2 days of supply and it takes 7 days to get new product in, I'll have like 5 days or 7 days out that product and I won't be able to sell anything. Okay. I need to think about my store profitability, what's going on. Labor optimization is really a key thing to think about in terms of how many people should I have on staff for specific days? And can I come up with a really efficient way of making sure that I have enough, but no more for any given situation, a specific day, day of the week, day of the year in terms of maybe holidays, look at the weather forecast and determine kind of, I think this weather is going to bring more people in or less people in. Um, and the marketing, so customer segmentation is a fairly typical thing. And then looking at the customer experience. What can I do with customer loyalty around this? But I've now got these frameworks that I can use that can help me look at this. The last one, I'll just bring this up too. Porter's Five Forces, which now is much more around the external look, what's going on around me as an organization. So what's going on with suppliers? What's going on with my buyers? What are the new entrants doing? And here again, I'm looking for the pain points. I'm looking for the interesting things that I can jump into. But now I hope you see that then these are all standard business frameworks. If you talk to somebody that's been on the business side, they should know every one of these without too much going on there, I guess. Okay. All right. So that's one way, is the business frameworks. And the second way we talked about, I can just go ask, what's keeping you up at night. So I can just interview people to get it. I can use these frameworks. Or the third one is, and I use old chat GPT on this to come up with these. And in fact, I should put the source on there to make it very clear that I did that. But I can go out and ask ChatGPT, what are some examples of areas where what are the business challenges out there, and then how can AI help that? And so it can actually feed into some things. And I can do this by industry. I can do it for my own company. I can because I can have that chat with ChatGPT or any of the other Gen AI um, tools to come up with this list of potential opportunities, and then I can evaluate them, right? And I have examples here from all different industries. And I didn't ask that. Patrick, do we make this deck available to the people that do this?
Yeah,
Or
we can make the deck available if it's something you'd like to share. Yeah, we can
yeah,
actually email it out with the recording. Yeah, we can make it
oh,
available. And Roger, I didn't mean to interrupt. We did have one question from Neo, which I think was great and was relevant to your last slide. So,
okay.
Neo, would you mind jumping on and asking your question? We would definitely welcome that if you can.
No, definitely can ask. So, Professor, thanks for the presentation. One of the things I would love to understand is where do you see low-hanging fruit in the value chain? And where can AI demonstrate ROI in some of these projects? One of the things that I do at work is do the analysis for my clients, and stuff is not very easy to find the ROI and also deal with technical debt, right? That some of these projects already have. So love to hear your take on
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, in this set of things, we're not looking for ROI yet. Here, we're just looking for that portfolio of opportunities. In fact, as we step forward, in fact, you kind of bring me to the next topic that I'll have. Okay, now how do we evaluate these? What tools do I use? What measures, what metrics do I use to decide which ones are more valuable? And ROI is one of those. Revenue is another one of those, or cost, depending on what's really important to your organization. But you're right, we need to get to that point. That's going to be very helpful to us. And we'll talk about kind of that framework for evaluation coming up shortly. So good question. Just give me a couple of minutes to get there. Okay. So I have examples across multiple industries. And given that the deck is going out, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through every single one of these examples, but they're here for you to kind of see. And so, you don't have to just, the way I think about this is you don't have to kind of, well, you could have a brainstorming session, but you don't have to do that, right? You can actually take advantage of using the frameworks, talking to somebody, and then actually looking out there and finding out what's going on out there. And to be honest too, something to look at times is looking at other industries and what they're doing and see if there's something they're doing that's applicable. So for example, if I look in financial services and banking, in my organization, might have a finance department where some of these things might be interesting for that department to take a look at and use. And I have, HR, I have finance, I have legal, right? I have logistics. And so each of those might come up in one of the other industries where it's more prevalent in the industry and not in the specific organization, the specific industry that we're talking about. So, lots of examples here of what you can do across all of these different industries. And uh, again, take a look at these and you'll get an idea of what you can do. And for each of you, as you're thinking about this, think about the industry that your organization is in. Or if you're, a student or going to be a student, it's like, remember this. And then as you join an organization, it's like there's tools out there now that you can use to figure out what kind of AI am I going to be able to do to help out with what's going on. Okay. Um, do you guys out there, do you have examples of what you think you could do in your industry with AI? Anybody? I see. I see one person unmuted themselves. Someone
Yeah,
else.
so yeah. So I just looking, I was kind of working in the manufacturing automation industries. So one of our challenges was when you build a solution, how we can uh, apply the same solution in different parts of the globe. Because if you're building something in probably in US, If you go to China, probably that is not valid because the ecosystems and all other things are different.
Yeah.
So can AI help us in that? Looking at the market dynamics and telling, okay, these solutions probably, if you tweak in these portions, probably your solution portfolio will look different, looking at different angles.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, yeah, AI can do that, right? It can understand the different markets and what drives those different markets. So you'd have to design something to kind of do that. Would a kind of an LLM kind of approach be able to do that? Quite possibly, right? It can think about what's different about China from the US. What things do I need to think about? And China is much bigger cities, things like that. I know an example that came up. AI didn't solve it per se, but it was one of those things where the markets are really different. FedEx thought that they were going to move into India very quickly, very easily. And they took their big trucks into India and they realized really quickly that their big delivery trucks don't work in India. Everybody delivering there was doing on those three-wheel carts, right? And I forget the name of those, but they all had like single driver and just a little bit of storage. And so when they first moved in to India, FedEx pretty much failed, and then they had to come back and basically redo their business model using a very different fleet of trucks to deliver. Okay, so that's a great point. So helping you think about what are the differences in the markets and what would it suggest changes to your product would be. And you could probably take that and take that out across the world and figure out what countries would be similar to the US. And you could go into those in a similar fashion and which ones are different enough that you're going to have to go in with a different product, a different business model, something like that. Sona.
Yeah, I currently work in airline revenue management, and I do a lot of like data analysis on like you said, pricing and revenue and all that. So I think I've been trying to use AI more to just like understand the patterns and like the booking behaviors that like I I can look in our reports and figure it out myself, but I'm trying to speed it up by like just seeing if AI can give me even more ideas. And then also just like automating some of our dashboards and like the code that I've made to do the analysis. It's helped refine it a lot. So there's definitely a lot more use cases I think the airlines can do. I think we're a little behind, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and that's an example where AI can come in. It's like it's not that you couldn't do it manually, but if you had to look at every flight over like an entire year across all the different markets, all the different flights, and kind of try to find some of the nuggets out there. It's like, yeah, individually, you'd be spending a lot of time doing that. But if you had AI help you and kind of identify what are the key drivers of the pricing, what things can I take advantage of to kind of increase prices for the customers where they're willing to pay for that. That's huge. Yeah, great example. And John, we'll take one more and we'll take John and then we'll move on.
Hi. Yeah, so I work in fundraising, and one of the common problems we have in fundraising is, just evaluating potential donor sentiment. So having AI be a tool to possibly uh, scrape the internet or compile information that data points we have together to build, sentiment scores to at least help us, get better direction on where to look when we're um, assessing our potential donors, because there's more potential donors than there is like attention span to give to all of them.
Yeah, and that's great. That's a great example, right? Where do I look? What do I say? How do I approach different groups of donors? And that's key, right? So yeah, that's a great example of where AI can come in handy. So very good. Great,
Thanks.
great examples, guys. I appreciate that. All right. So let's move on. So now I've got this portfolio. I've got a big set of great ideas. And as was brought up, and now I don't remember who did it, but brought up, it's like, okay, how do I figure out the which one I should do? How are they doing an ROI? And I do need to think about how do I measure that? And how do I lay it out in a way that I can help the business see which ones we want to go after? And I'm just going to say that this is an approach that I've used previously with clients, and the 2x2 is a huge way to simply show people where things fall. And the two dimensions that we look at is, what's the business impact that this opportunity has, and or business benefits. You can call it a lot of different things, strategic impact, but what's the impact of the business? And then and the other direction is this, how easy is it to put this thing together? Okay. And on the graph on the right, it's like it's kind of a no-brainer almost to say that upper right corner uh, is low hanging fruit, right? Those are the ones high impact and they're easy to do. We should be jumping on those as quickly as we can in general. Bottom left is a no-go zone. It's not much of an impact and it's pretty hard to do. I don't know that I want to expend the resources on that. And I've made it yellow here only because sometimes, and we'll talk about it later, is I may still want to do some of those for very specific reasons that my framework doesn't kind of grab in the way that I want it to. I had one of my colleagues at BCG always loved saying, and I know this is a quote from somebody, but all models are wrong. All frameworks are wrong. Some are just more interesting than others. So however we lay this out, however we decide to score these things, we know it's not perfect. And we need to think about that. But it's there. And so now let's do that. I don't want to, I want to be quantitative about this, not just qualitative. So I want to put some dimensions on this. So, kind of literally, I should say, on those two benefits, two dimensions, benefits and ease. I want to think about what are the factors that go into it. So on the business side, I'll come up with a list of those factors. So impact on strategy, top line growth, so revenue really there, competitive advantage, business scorecard. These are real examples from a client. Each organization will likely create their own set of those factors that go into the dimensions. But you get an idea. This is where that ROI can come into play. What's the ROI going to be? That's a business benefit. And we want to call that out. But there are other things that we look at there. It's not just dollars, but do I have legal risk with this? Do I have reputational risk? What's the change management going to be to put this into place, right? Those are the business challenges, business benefits or challenges that I face. Ease of implementation. Is this technology something that we have already? Or is this a brand new technology we don't have? Do we have the data to support it? A lot of times, we think we do, but as soon as we get into it, we realize that we don't have enough data to build a machine learning model. We barely have enough data to build a simple linear regression. In fact, I've worked on things before where it's like first cut heuristic model. That's the best we can do. If we work on cleaning up more data and or start collecting more data that's useful, we might be able to build a linear regression. And after a year or so, for some length of time, I might have enough to actually do a machine learning model. So again, we've got things in that dimension that we can look at to do that. And then I formally want to lay that out and say, as I'm building this, I can make this very quantitative. So I've taken the business benefits and ease of implementation, and I've laid out each of the factors that go into it, and I've defined what it means to score on each of these. So it's not as arbitrary as you might think. So it's definitely less arbitrary than just sticking a pin on that 2x2. Now I've got factors and I've got scores across those factors, and I can make them, into anything. I'm using a Likert scale, 1 to 5 effectively. And I give kind of an idea of what's a 1 and what's a 5 and what's kind of in the middle. And that actually makes it easier for me to score this from 1 to 5. I might even be able to, kind of eke out a 1.5 or a 3.2 if I want to, but at least have an idea what that scale looks like and what it means to be one end or the other. So I now am pushing this pretty quantitatively, which is helpful. And that means that I can take any one of my opportunities. Again, this is example from a client that I worked with, that you describe what's going on, you lay out kind of what the value is, and this again, the frame or this template that we got was from the client what they wanted to know, what they wanted to share with the executive organization about each of these opportunities. And then on the right-hand side, we scored it. And, on the business benefit side and on the ease of implementation side. And now we've got 4.17 and 3.0. And I can put that, on the 1 to 5 and each of those two dimensions, put it right on that 2x2 chart. Okay. And just to show you that, this is a clip from a spreadsheet that I've set up and used with clients around this, where I actually add another, kind of piece in here where I weight each of those factors. And I say that there are some factors that are more important than others. And so, an example here is I really want to look at data rate of change in terms of the ease. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I clicked my button. Ease is important and data availability is important. Those are two things that I want to rank higher and looking at, is this easy to do? And then on the impact side, the client specifically was looking for things that they could use real time. Is this something that I can use? And this was a retail store. So they wanted things that they could literally put in the store and impact real-time decisions of their customers. Okay. So that's what I had going on. And so now let's talk a little bit about that. Okay. How does your organization evaluate opportunities? Or do you have, if you're not in an organization, how do you think they should be or have been in your experience? Any interesting ways to do that? How could those be applied to AI opportunities? So, Neo, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a question generic to the previous slide. So, who, in your experience, who's driving this analysis? Is that the IT department, the line of business? Is that coming from the C-suite?
That's a great question. So, let's, given it's all here, who do you think can do the business benefits best?
Say line of business in many situations.
I'm sorry?
Line of business in many
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah, it's likely the business, right? Can the business answer the ease of implementation?
That's IT.
Yeah, that's more the technology side, IT, AI, those kind of people. So this isn't something that can be scored by typically a single person. It typically requires a set of people. And what we would do with an organization is we'd literally set up a workshop. And we'd have some people come in from the business side, some people come in from the technology side, and we'd score this, as a working group, and come back with the visibility of how this, acts from a business side and a technology side. That allowed us to feel comfortable about where those things were going. And nobody could complain that it wasn't getting a good look from the business side or that we weren't really thinking about the technology. Okay. So good question. Very good. Anybody else on what your organization does or anything? Any questions on this material? Okay, I'm going to keep rolling then. So now got that portfolio. We figured out how to score it. Now let's talk about how do I prioritize and sequence these things, right? And I've got just a sample again from that client. Cleaned it up. So here's my 2x2. I've gone through and I've scored these opportunities, and they're up on this 2x2. And I know that upper right corner is low hanging fruit, and I know the bottom left is stuff that's kind of, it's going to be hard to do, and it really isn't that important to the organization based on the scoring. So you'd think security and surveillance probably isn't going to be something that we pick up. And we could sort of say, you know what, I'm going to take, upper right corner and move down to the lower left. That's how I'm going to order everything. Okay. Or at least I'm going to pick off everything in the upper right quadrant first and foremost. So that's something to do that. So this is laying it out. And we know upper right quadrant is kind of a cool place to be. But now I want to toss in the art of doing this. And that is, I might pick that number one that I've called out. it's not quite as important, but they're both easy to do, or the same ease to do. And I might be looking for that thing as, developing these AI. Maybe this is the first AI thing that I'm offering up. I might want to take one that isn't as critically important to the organization to give me a chance to kind of, figure this out, to maybe stumble a little bit. If it's really high visibility, if it's that number two that I have, um, I'm going to be really concerned that if I stumble, I could really put them off on doing these AI things. So I might say, let's start with one that's a little bit lower visibility. Let's go to one that is more high visibility now that we've figured out how we're going to go after these. And one I might pick out is like, no, let's go for something that's much more, impactful, but I know it's going to be hard to do. Okay. I'm going to skip some of the other, easier ones before I'm before I do those other easier ones. I'm going to go after this one because it's important. This is where the that thinking comes into play, that art that comes into play. And the one that I mentioned before, the security and surveillance, what came out was this ended up being a requirement that the organization needed to do. There was, basically there were regulations that required them to execute on this. And so that fed in very early into the linkages here, the ordering of these, and it really didn't score up here. But it is, like I said, it's like this model, this framework is wrong in certain situations. We didn't take into account. We could have, I suppose. It's like, does this fulfill specific regulations, and weighted that 50% or something like that to kind of make it come out. Or, like I said, we don't have to follow this exactly. We can leverage what we know about this to kind of use an art way of picking out how I'm going to order these. In general, I'm probably going to start upper right, work to lower left, but I know that I can adjust. And as long as I can justify, at least I can have that conversation, right? And what I like about this is if, human productivity and allocation management is, basically operations kind of stuff. I can go to uh, the operations people and say, this is where you guys are on this. There's a whole set of things that are much more important than this. And clearly there are more important things that are a lot easier to do. Um, it, we can't argue just to do this. You've got to help me understand why I should put yours above everybody else. And it now becomes a discussion about measures, about importance, especially against those factors that we've identified that the organization values. And so now it becomes much more not about the specific thing. I want you to do mine. I want you to do mine. Please do mine. It's much more around, well, where does yours it really doesn't cut it to be in the top five that we're going to consider right now. Yes, it's going to be there at some time, but how do we think about that? Okay. So I now have a way of laying those things out, and I can use that information to sequence these, prioritize these, uh, and I can use some art. I can use some arguments. I can point out where this model is wrong, and adjust, or where I need to be thoughtful about how I approach these. And so, Somaneth, I noticed you're not on mute.
Oh yeah, I was looking at your slide. Looks to be the Boston Consulting Group, the growth matrix here. Like, where should we invest? Where your high share, high growth, or low share and high growth opportunities?
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I spent quite a few years at Boston Consulting, and we didn't use it just for the growth share matrix. Two by twos ends up being probably one of the best ways to communicate with organizations, with the business, with anybody in the organization, in fact, about where things are. It's easy to argue about this, um, and I can get into the details behind it, how I scored it, into those detailed factors, and we can talk about that. But I can present this to a CEO, or I can, present this to a director or a manager, and we can talk about where all these things fall. And it's like, again, I can talk about, security and surveillance. According to this, it's really hard to do, and it's a low priority from a business perspective. And then they can argue back on it. In this case, it's like, but regulation requires us to put this into place. Okay. So yeah, 2x2s become very good methods for communicating with others about it, especially senior executive. Okay. All right. Now let me talk a little bit about what goes on with these 2x2s. What happens to ease of implementation? And I brought the slide up already. I probably should have held it back a little bit. What's going on with all my, my portfolio, all those portfolio of opportunities? What's happening? They're drifting, right? Technology is getting better, cheaper, all of these things that are going to kind of keep pushing them to being easier to do. And that's one thing. Some of them are going to jump at times. Some are going to jump because, the dependent technology. For example, there's a set of data that we don't have. We get the set of data. All of the opportunities that are depending on having that set of data now can kind of jump over to easier because we've got the data or we've got that tool in place. We've got people that know how to use that tool. And so it becomes easier to do. So everything jumps. So I can have that happen. There's a couple of things that can shift it the other way. Regulation coming into play can make things harder to do. Acquisitions. If I want to include another business unit in what I'm calculating, I've got new data sets, and all of a sudden the data might be very not good for that organization. So a project becomes much harder to do because I've got good data in the organization we had. That acquisition made it much harder because the data is not clean coming from that organization. So mostly shifting to getting easier. A couple of instances where it can shift a little bit to the left to make it harder to do. Okay. How about the other direction? What do people think about business benefits? Are business benefits getting, is it more impactful? Are they getting less impactful? Any thoughts on that? I don't have cameras on, but I don't know. Give me a thumbs up if you think it's going to go up, and I'll assume everybody else thinks it's going to go down. That things are going to become less impactful. They're going to become more impactful. I got one finger raised. Oh, there's some more. Okay, people are thinking it's going to become more impactful over time, so it's going to move up. Okay, all right. So now I got some people committing, and I can say, you know what? Um, it's not quite like that. It's business benefits can change, and it can go in either direction. It can become higher importance or it can become lower importance. Executive focus can drive that. So the senior, the CEO, all of a sudden says, you know what, we need to grow internationally. And all of a sudden, any of the projects that were international related, so picking those next countries, that one might have been kind of lower priority. All of a sudden, it's become much higher priority. Okay. Or the other direction. It's like, I don't want to grow internationally. Let's retrench. Let's kind of cut those projects. Let's make them less important to us right now. So that changes it in the down direction. One of my favorite examples here is, what happened, with COVID. And we'll make COVID like a specific day. Day before COVID, all these things are lined out really nicely, right? Day after COVID, all of a sudden there's a pile of things that are probably really down far, and even if they're underway, it's like, okay, we can stop these. It's wasting time now because right now we need to focus on things that are more remote. So examples, McDonald's as a restaurant, anything that they were doing in store day after COVID, it's like, yeah, don't worry about that. Nobody's coming in store. But, drive through and delivery, hugely important. So we might want to go back and start looking for opportunities that address those areas. And hopefully we can find some that will do that. So again, they kind of bounce around. So executive focus, competitive actions. One of my competitors does something that impacts what's important to me now. And so I have to think about what do I do now to do that? Things in the environment. I just talked about COVID is the environment, and other things like that that cause what's in my portfolio to shift importance or ease of implementation. Okay. All right. And now kind of let's talk about this. I just talked about things are moving kind of mostly, kind of to easier and can bounce up and down that way. How often should I reevaluate my portfolio? Do I do it like once a year, do you think? Anybody want to venture a guess a good time
Um, budget
coming
cycle.
up? I'm sorry?
Budget cycle.
Budget cycle. I'm on an annual budget. So we're going to do it once a year? Do I
Every
have
day, I
to?
think.
Huh?
It's kind of a continuous
Every
process.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's so I don't think it's annually. I don't think it needs to potentially be tied to the budget. Let's see if I can lay this out. I clearly want to think about if I just rebalance the portfolios, so to say, and then COVID hits. I think I want to evaluate it again that next day. So external impact it can be high, and I don't want to base my decisions on that. So I probably will go back and reevaluate the portfolio, and likely it'll be driven by something like that. I started having conversations um, with people about this, and the sort of the AI life cycle is. I was just at a conference today when I was talking with people, and people are thinking it's like 90 days is kind of a long time and a lot of AI stuff. And so all of us are starting to think about, and maybe it's like monthly that you kind of take a look at this stuff again and kind of reevaluate and measure these things to make sure that the next one we're going to pick is at the right point in that, kind of that 2x2. Okay. So it's something to think about that way. Um, all right. I think that's all I had. And so I'll step back here and I'll say, so anybody have, oh, there's a question. Rajiv.
Hi, Professor. Yeah, thanks for this discussion. I actually had an example from work which I wanted to share. So
Okay.
I'm working in the auto industry, and one of the big initiatives we had was implementing telematics in the past few years. And we began that. It was a huge company priority. But what we found was that the value added from telematics segmentation was not as much as we expected. And in fact, that some of the limitations on the potential benefit was due to regulatory constraints. So, like, for example, North Carolina, as a state, limits the maximum amount we can charge a customer, no matter what their risk profile is. So, this is something that we started off really quickly, but then after a few months, we found that it was an improvement, but not as much as we would have expected. And the company sort of cooled off on that.
Right. Yeah. So it became less of a strategic, important. So it drops down. Yeah. That's a great example of that business benefit moving on you. So I worked with a client and the the AI department was trying to be really responsive to requests. And a senior executive said, we really need this. I won't talk about what it was, but really need this. And I happened to be there 2 weeks later when the AI department was sharing it with that senior executive. And the senior executive goes, yeah, I remember saying that was important, but I don't remember why. I can't think of why that's really important now to me. So within 2 weeks, the senior executive themselves decided it wasn't important. And so the work that they had done had changed. So weird things can happen. Hopefully those things don't happen very often, but they can. Senior executives, what they want, what they need, and outside things like you're saying, it's like how it actually was working, sort of shown that you needed to rethink that. Okay. Any other questions or comments out there? A very quiet audience. What did you think of this? Was this interesting, useful? Patrick wants to know because he's going to give me a bonus or not. Okay. I want a big bonus.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I found this pretty interesting, especially like how you can identify untapped opportunities that may still be out there.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Any other comments, thoughts?
Yeah. My question was, I think maybe I put the questions that, we are believing on mostly on the, LLM responses, right? Probably we should have a kind of a evaluation metrics to see that when whatever response we are getting, is it valid, or, how much a market study really it has been done, or, or this kind of a things like, oh, this kind of a good to have, like not something need to be taken as like from the book, or, as from the strategy guidelines. So how do you know that, this is the correct and final response, or you need to go and poke the LLM more and more?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to use this tool. So, and this is happening right now. I think it's using the kicker for this. The kind of the tagline on this is, somebody comes into the AI people and goes like, agentic, 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 agentic. We need an agentic model. You can come back and say, okay, let's take what you're trying to do, and let's see where it falls. Is it easy to do? And is it something that is really impactful to the organization in the way that we want to measure it? And if it comes up, really high in that upper right quadrant, it's something you do. If it comes out kind of low on that, then you have to think about that, right? And for stuff like an agentic, and I deal with people on this a bit, and that is, it's like agentic is really cool, but how many people in your organization can actually work with that? So I don't have the people that have the expertise to be able to do that. So I might have to go outside. That makes it more difficult to do. If it's, agentic, I don't have processes in place to deal with that. I don't have governance around how the agentic model gets used. Those have to be developed. So that makes it harder to do. And so if you start measuring those things out, it makes it a little bit harder to do. Rajiv. Rajiv, are you there?
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually had a big picture type of question. Um, do you see like any limitations on data privacy or data usage inhibiting the use of AI and limiting use cases or limiting adoption?
So that should be part of this 2x2. If there are data that you're using that are important or regulated or things like that, you have to think about those kinds of things. This organization that I work with didn't have that, but you need to think about, is there data privacy things involved? Is there regulatory? Right? Do I have HIPAA? How much of a HIPAA issue is using this data? So if I'm working on this thing and it needs HIPAA data, how dangerous is this in a respect? So I might want to add that factor in here if I'm in that kind of space. HIPAA, so kind of healthcare kind of stuff, financial services. There's also things that I might want to measure around regulation. And even in consumer, it's like right to be forgotten kinds of things. Are there things that I'm going to be doing that might violate, even those kinds of rights? So yeah, I think it needs to be incorporated. I don't think I don't think AI limits it specifically. I think we need to think about how we should limit how we use AI to do things. Okay, and be very thoughtful about that. Careful not to, violate HIPAA or financial, kind of regulations, etc. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. Hey, Professor, could you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. So this is kind of a personal question. More so, I'm coming from a non-traditional tech background and trying to break into data science, learn more, and hopefully get involved in the industry. I'm wondering if you have any advice for how one would do that coming from a non-traditional background.
Well, you can always get a master's in applied data science and jump into this. And Patrick's
Yeah.
laughing. It's like Patrick can probably answer that better. But yeah, there's ways of learning it. You can um, you can use, lots of different ways, but one of them is to think about, should I get the master? Should I go all in on, kind of upping to that level and then kind of coming out and looking for a job in that new space? Okay. The
Yeah,
other thing I
and
think, go ahead.
oh yeah, Roger. I was just gonna say too, Renee, one thing that we love to do as a team is kind of get to know folks, talk about candidacy. You can always reach out to me after. We can set some time aside through Zoom, just to talk about your background. I do that often with students, and we have a pretty curated list of things to prepare for, whether you're considering a master's, or just some like good upskilling opportunities. So always happy to help, if you do have questions after.
That'd be perfect. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I didn't put that slide in, but if people want to chat with me afterwards, I'm on LinkedIn, um, Roger Moore. I'm in Chicago. I think, yeah, Chicago, University of Chicago, Roger Moore. I think it narrows it down pretty quickly. So connect with me there, and um, I'm sure you can find me. I'm on the faculty list for this program, so you can find my email there, I think. So I'm more than willing to answer any questions or chat about this stuff myself. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Roger, for joining us this evening for your presentation. We just want to thank everyone for joining us, especially if you're East Coast. We know it's late, so we do appreciate that. Students who may be tuning in internationally. Something I did want to point out is we actually have, this is number 12 in the series. We have number 13 coming up next month. And we're actually going to have one of our alumni and current TAs, Steve Veldman, join us. Steve has also been a recent guest on our podcast. Roger, I'm sure you will be a guest on our podcast sometime soon. And we're really happy to share that with everyone. So I'm just going to post the information about the podcast and the podcasts that are hosted by the University of Chicago. But thank you again, everyone. And as Roger said, with questions, things, reach out to us. We can always connect with Roger. And then I'm always happy to help if there's questions regarding admissions or enrollment. So thank you all and have a great evening.